Can we just get real honest this morning? Do I have to do a cute little intro to make you laugh? Can we just get right to it? Can we just get right to it? How many of you have been offended before in your life? You didn't raise your hand. Why did you not raise your hand? Which couple you did not? Do you like to lie in church? Is that what you want to do? Right. I'm offended that you did not raise your hand. Now you made me get offended, right? So let's try this again. How many people have been offended before in your life? Right. How many of you have offended somebody else? yeah. I thought maybe some hands would go down like, I've never done that. Now people have offended me. I can give you a list all the way down, but no. Do you know when it comes to offense, oftentimes offense comes around to us because we assume things and we expect things that are not correct. Oftentimes we assume that somebody's going to wave back at us when we wave at them. How dare they not wave at me? There's Pastor Justin right there at the stoplight. I waved at him for 30 seconds. He didn't even look over. He actually glanced over and looked right back straight. How dare him not even wave at me? I expected them to thank me for that gift that I got them. I expected a note that they would write back saying, thank you for buying me that. I expected them to send me a text acknowledging the fact that I was there to watch their game. I expected them to say they were sorry, and they didn't. I just assumed out of the goodness of their heart they would apologize for the attitude that they just gave me. I would have assumed that they would have came and visited me when I wasn't feeling good. I would have assumed and expected someone to call and check on me. Now I'm offended at all of them who didn't come. Did you know there's the fruit that comes from offense and walking in offense? Here's the fruit. See if you've ever had this fruit in your life. You're hurt, angry, you have some outrage, jealousy, envy, and resentment of other people. Ring a bell with anybody? Let me just define offense to you real quick. Just make sure we're on the same page. Offense is this. This is the definition that I like. Resentment brought about by a perceived insult to one's standards. Now let's pause here for a minute. Resentment, so I'm upset, I'm not happy because a perceived insult. Whether or not somebody insulted you or not has nothing to do with offense, by the way. I hope you know that. You can be offended and someone not even mean to do anything against you, right? In fact, you can be offended by somebody you've never met before who's doing something to somebody you've never met before, right? I can't believe that person in another country would do that to that person in that other country. I'm offended. I'm mad. It's perceived insult to one's standards. What's that mean? To what I believe and what I stand on. So since you don't agree with what I believe, I'm insulted. And I am now offended. Canceled. You're canceled. Well, here's the scary thing spiritually, is the offended heart is the breeding ground for deception. When you have an offense happen to you and you take the offense, because remember, you take offense. No one offends you. You decide to be offended. So when you decide to live offended because of something happened in your life, now you've set yourself up to be deceived. And so the person who has an offended heart, the Christian who has an offended heart, likes to take in life, but they don't like to give it back out. Because if you're offended, now your focus is on yourself. It's all about me because they did me wrong. So now I am offended. And that's exactly what the enemy wants you to do. Did you know that? The enemy wants you to be completely inwardly focused. The enemy wants you to be isolated so he can insulate you with lies and then eliminate you from the plan that God has for your life. Let me say that again. The enemy wants to isolate you from the body of Christ, to insulate you with lies, so therefore eliminate you from the call of God that he has on your life and the plan he has for you. And ultimately, Satan wants to do these three things with an offended heart. Number one, divide families, friends, and churches. So families, your husband and wives, right? Kids and parents, cousins, brothers, sisters, etc., to divide families. I'm offended. You didn't say you come to do this. You didn't say you were sorry. You spoke to me like this. Friends, people that are supposed to be there with you in your life group, and you get mad because they didn't do this and they didn't do that. They said this, they said that. And churches, ultimately, Satan would love to divide the church. Satan loves to see churches split. Second thing is this: distract Christians from their mission. Distract you from what God has called you to do. I don't know if you know this, but when Satan can distract you from what God has called you to do, not only do you get held back, but you have a past inward focus in your life instead of a future outward focus in your life. Let me say that again. When you're distracted from what God's called you to do, you have a past inward focus in your life instead of forward outward focus in your life. Number 3, discredit your witness. So the enemy wants you to be discredited out in the secular world where the lost people are at, people that need to know about Jesus. He wants you to look just like them. And what does that look like? To be offended. If you don't know God, you probably will walk around offended a lot because it's all about you. If you're actually following Jesus, your life is not about you, it's about Him. So you shouldn't be as offended, right? And so when you get mad and you get angry, what you look like is offended and not faithful, okay? A follower of Jesus looks faithful, looks committed to a call that's bigger than themselves. So the enemy wants to divide, distract, and discredit. Jesus actually warns us about this, by the way, in Luke 17, verse 1. Then he said, this is Jesus talking to disciples, it's impossible that no offenses should come. Now, I don't know about you, but when Jesus says something's impossible, it's impossible, okay? The God of all possibilities, if He says something's impossible, it is impossible. So you are going to encounter offenses in your life. So listen, Christians, if you're a Christian, lean in just a second. Don't be shocked when you get offended by something. Jesus said there are going to be offenses. Did you know when He talks about offenses here, the Greek word that Jesus uses is this. It's scandalon. Scandalon. Now, when He says there's going to be offenses, the word scandalon, what that word means, it's the trigger in a trap that causes it to close and clamp down. Did you know that? It's the trigger in the trap is the scandalon. So what Jesus is saying, there's always going to be little triggers out there, little traps sitting out there. Always going to be there. So don't think just because you're a Christian, they all just disappear. And Satan goes, well, I can't mess with them anymore. No. The trap is for you, Christian. He ain't worried about you until you said, I want to follow Jesus. Okay, now I got some traps for you. We'll see how much you want to follow Him. Right? And so, let me define it to you this way. Offense is a bait that will lure us into a trap of bitterness, resentment, and unforgiveness. So offense is bait in the trap to lure you in, and once you get in and it clamps down on you, you will be bitter, you'll have resentment and unforgiveness in your life. And I will go as far to say as this: I believe that offense is one of the most hidden weapons of the enemy. Most hidden. Why is this true? Because of this. There are endless amounts of ways to get offended. I mean, literally. There's just so many. In fact, I looked up a few because here's the thing. The enemy has different bait for different people. Okay? So what one bait might work for you, it might not work for you. But he knows you. He's been watching you. So let me just list off a couple of these. You just keep a tally of how many of these get you offended sometimes, okay? How about this one? When somebody's just apathetic. Like they just don't care about stuff that you care about. How about somebody who just willfully is ignorant about things? They just don't want to know about stuff that you know about. And you're like, why do you not care about what I know about? What about someone who's a hypocrite? Who says they believe in one thing, but the way they walk is completely different. Does that offend you a little bit? What about somebody who uses a guilt trip on people? He's always making other people feel guilty. Oh, I heard a few little noises there. How about this one? Someone who's just really selfish. And they love to interrupt you as you're talking to tell you about something going on in their life. They ask you a question about you, but they don't really want to hear about you. They just want to talk about them, right? Everybody loves that person. How about the passive-aggressive person? Ooh, they're really fun to be friends with, aren't they? What about someone who's condescending, who talks down to people all the time? What about, here's one. I know some of your favorites is this one. Mr. or Miss Know-It-All. Like, there's not a topic that they're not an expert on. Like, they know all about everything. And you can bring up anything. And you can literally know they've never had any experience with that. And you can bring it up and they will know something about it, right? How about the person who underestimates you? Does that offend you? When they talk to you like you're a little kid and don't treat you like you feel like you need to be treated and respected. What about somebody who preys on somebody who's vulnerable? Does that offend you? What about somebody who likes to tease and joke at somebody but likes to cross a line to where it hurts the person? Does that offend you? What about somebody who's trolling all the time on social media? Your best friend, you love those people and hang out with them this weekend? Huh? Yeah? No? What about somebody who procrastinates? Always late, never on time, can't depend on them. What about someone who's just habitually rude? They're just rude. They just look angry all the time. What about this person who never keeps their word? Now, I don't know if you kept score there, and maybe you were like, yeah, bro, I don't like that person, or that person like that. I don't like any of them. In fact, everyone you listed, I don't like any of them, right? Maybe you all have a scorecard, and you're like, well, I'm running out of room to keep track of all these, right? Because these are about all my friends right now, like, you know what I'm saying? But let me ask you a question. As you were listening to all of those things, could it possibly be that maybe sometimes you get more concerned with the speck in somebody else's eye than the plank in yours? Maybe are you some of those things sometimes? Here's my point. Guess what? Newsflash, we live in a very offended culture right now. I'll just even say an offended world right now. Is that far-fetched to say? Which shouldn't be shocking to Christians, by the way, but it should be alarming. It shouldn't be shocking. It should be alarming. Why? Because Jesus talked about this in Matthew 24 when he's talking about the season of the end times. That we all know, none of us know when the end times are. We don't know the exact time. But Jesus said we can know the season. And he explained it in verse 10. Check this out. And then, this is in the season of the end times, many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Now, by the way, when Jesus said this in the Greek, many means the majority. The majority will be offended and will betray one another and will hate one another. I don't know about you, but I think we're there. Yeah, I think we're in the season. Many will be offended, will betray one another, and hate one another. Let me explain to you how this works. When you get offended by somebody by what they did or what they did not do that you expected or assumed that they would do or would not do, here's what happens. You put up a mental wall between you and them. Did you know that? And when you put up a mental wall, here's what happens. It makes it extremely easy for you to betray them. Right? Because we're no longer connected anymore. Because you offended me. I put a wall up. So all I need is just one little thing to turn my back and go, yeah, I don't like them anymore. I'll gossip about them. I'll talk about them. I don't care. I put a wall up, right? And the second I put a wall up, boy, it's easy for me to hate somebody, right? Let me also explain what hate, the word hate there that Jesus uses. It's really not so much hate like I'm throwing stuff at them and I'm mad at them that way. What he means is without love. Like I have no love for them. No positive emotion towards that person. So I get offended. I put a wall up. It's easy for me to go, yeah, what'd you say about them? That's true. They are true. You should have seen what they said to me. Right? They said about me. And then I have hate in my heart. I have no love for that person. And what's happening in our society is that. Let me ask you a question that I get asked all the time. Hey, Pastor Justin, do I have the right to be offended? I literally get this question on a fairly regular basis. As a Christian, Pastor Justin, don't I have the right to be offended? Here's my answer for you. Sure, if you want to be offended, it's your choice. You're a big boy and big girl. It's up to you. But let me just say this to you. If you decide to be offended, there are consequences. Okay? There are consequences to that. Let me also say this. Followers of Jesus forfeit their right to be offended. Did you know that? You forfeit your right to be offended. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? Because God forgave you when you supremely offended him in your sin and the way that you've walked before you were saved, right? You don't deserve to be forgiven, right? Some people did not hear that, right? You don't deserve to be forgiven. Your offenses against God, a holy God, a perfect God, you don't deserve to be forgiven. They're getting convicted, but I don't know about you guys over here. I feel like you were not convicted enough. Holy Spirit, come on. You don't deserve to be forgiven. As you offended a holy God who's a perfect God. You offended him. And that's why when we sing about Jesus Christ, my living hope, the hope is the fact that he loved me so much that he didn't just leave me and betray me when he should have betrayed me and hated me. He turned around and gave me love and grace and forgiveness. So therefore, I put my trust and my love in him, okay? And when I do that because he forgave me, I forfeit my right to judge and be offended by somebody else, right? How about this? Offense is an event. Being offended is a decision. It's true. So something can happen to you. Josh can come up and say, Pastor Justin, that outfit you have today, look like you're going to a funeral. What's your problem today? And I can say, Josh, I don't like your haircut. Or whatever, I don't know, I can say something back to him. Or I can go, Josh, maybe he's going through something today. And he's my brother, and maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe it was a joke and I just don't know how to take his humor. Whatever it is. But if I decide to be offended, that's a decision I made. That's not on Josh, right? That's on me. And we have too many Christians that get offended because of whatever's out there on social media, or this talking head said this person said this, my coworker said this, my best friend said this, my mom said this, my dad said this, the pastor said this, now I'm offended, right? And it goes from just an event that happened where you can back up and say, you know what, I didn't like that, but my God's bigger than that. And then being offended is literally carrying a weight with you that's dragging you down and taking your focus off of God and putting your focus back on yourself, right? It's a decision to be offended. You decide if you want to be offended. And if I'm being really honest with you, when I think about somebody in the Bible who had all the right and every reason to live offended, would be Joseph. Joseph, son of Jacob and Rachel. Jacob, son of Isaac, and Abraham. Isaac, son of Abraham. Oh, Joe had 11 brothers. You want to jump in this story just real quick? Can we just jump in here real fast? Genesis 37. Check this out. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended to his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. So here's the brothers coming in. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Now, some of you are going to go, oh, he's a snitch. That's not good. But what if it was your job to do that? What if he's just doing his job? What if he's being a good manager and looking out for what is his father's? Let's check this out. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. Pause for a second. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children. Now, Here's what happens when you read that. If you don't really understand the Hebrew and you go back to the original text of what's being said, you can be quick to go, wow, like, man, Jacob, you playing favorites like that? Man, if I was one of those brothers, I would be mad too at Joseph. But if you look back at what's being said here, and the story is connecting the verse before, that Joseph was a good manager of things. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. And there's part of that is because Joseph came from Rachel, his beloved, right? You guys remember, if you know the story. Jacob loved Rachel, and they had Joseph. But also in the Hebrew, it's connecting that thought before that, because sometimes in English we put periods where the thought hasn't been completed. But most scholars will look at that, and they believe that what was actually being said here is that Joseph was a good manager. He had integrity more than his older brothers. And we see that as you continue in the story, that the older brothers didn't have a lot of integrity, but Joseph did. Keep that thought. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved or favored him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. His brothers hated Joseph because the father favored him. Have you ever assumed that somebody favored someone else other than you, and you got offended by that? Have you ever assumed that your boss favored somebody else at your workplace than you, and you immediately got offended by them and held resentment towards them? Have you ever felt looked over when you should have been the one picked? So maybe, just maybe, you can understand where the brothers are coming from just a little bit, Let's go on. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. So check it out. Listen to this dream, he said. Gather around, everybody. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and all the other bundles around, all your guys' bundles, bowed down before mine. Pause for a minute. Now, I hear some laughing. So some of you are probably thinking, wow, like I probably wouldn't have told them that. But let me just change your thinking just a little bit. What if Joseph, he's young, he's coming to his family who he should be able to trust, right? He should be able to trust them. Is just coming to his family saying, hey guys, I had this dream. Can y'all help me sort this out? I don't even know what it means. What if God gave him that dream to prophetically warn them about some things going to come up, and they just didn't listen, right? They assumed he meant one thing, but maybe God was trying to get their attention a different way. Do you see the selfishness it takes to read that in a different tone and go, how dare you say that I'm going to bow down to you, little boy? Right? When God could be saying, if you don't trust me, you're going to get offended because I have a special assignment for Joseph that you're not going to be assigned for, but he is. And if you don't listen to me, you're going to bow down to him. What if God had something special for them too, but they wouldn't listen? And they got offended. Some of you here today, you're so offended by what God's doing in somebody else's life that you're missing out what God's calling you to do. Right? You're so offended. Let's move on. His brothers responded, you think you'll be our king, do you? Do you actually think you're going to reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Now, how the story goes on after this, verse 18 through 36, it continues on. They're very mad. They kind of huddle up. We got to get rid of this guy because, Dad loves him. He don't love us. So instead of going to Dad and talking this out or talking to Joseph, we're just going to just kill him. That's what we'll do. We'll just throw him in a little pit. We'll just throw him down there and just let him die. Then they finally decide, well, we'll just pull him back out instead of just throwing him down there. We'll just sell him. We'll do that. Then we'll lie to Dad and say he died, so whatever. The point is we just want to get rid of him, right? Why? Why did the brothers want to do that? They were offended, and then offended. Offended. Do you see the bait of offense and the result of being offended? Going against the will of God. So here's what happened. They held on to the offense. They didn't have to hold on to the offense. They could have saw the coat and went to Dad and be like, hey, Dad, what's up with this coat, man? Like, and Dad could have been like, hey, knucklehead, like, you don't do what I tell you to do. And he does. Like, that's why he got a coat and you don't, right? If you straighten up, I'll get you a coat too. But like, they held on to the offense. And you flip it the other way, Joseph overlooked the offense. Don't you think Joseph could have got offended in the middle of this? I'm just telling you guys my dream. You throw me in a pit, you pull me out, I think I'm going to get saved. Now you sell me? Like what? But as we go into the story of Joseph, which we will the next few weeks, you're going to find that it says over and over again, the Lord was with Joseph. Every time someone betrays him and turns their back on him and shows hatred towards him, it says the Lord was with Joseph. Why is the Lord with Joseph? Overlooked an offense, right? Now, I want to read you this particular proverb as I come to a close here. Proverbs 19:11. This is super short, and it's very simple. I'm going to give you 5 points out of this, okay? A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. One more time. It's a person's wisdom that yields patience, and it's to one's glory to overlook an offense. Now, let me break this down for you, okay? This is how we deal with offense as Christians, okay? You ready? Number one, not everybody overlooks an offense. Only wise people do. Do you know that? Only the wise overlook an offense. The immature cannot look over an offense, right? How dare they do that to me? They say that to me. They didn't do that. They should have done that. I'm more important than that. They don't think I'm important. I am so mad at them and their family and their organization and everybody else that looks like and talks like them and whatever. It doesn't matter. Votes like them. I don't like all of them. I'm offended. But wise people can overlook an offense. Number two, overlooking an offense leads to transformation. It says it's to one's glory to overlook an offense. To one's glory. What does that mean? To rise up to where God's called you. The ability to rise up above the fray, right, will lead you to transformation. Your heart changes every time you're able to overlook an offense. Some of you today, the reason why you're not growing spiritually is because you are so offended. And the transformation you need in your heart is held back because you're holding on to an offense. Check this one out. Number three, to overlook an offense means to step over it. The literal Hebrew word there is called a bar. It means to step over an offense. Let me just give you a visual of this. So we pretend we have a trap right here, okay? We got a trap, okay? So if this is an offense, what I would do if I'm wise and I'm a follower of Christ, I come up to the offense. Oh, look at here. There's my trap. Thank you, Terrell. There we go. There's a trap. So here's a trap, guys. And remember what Satan wants to do. He wants to set a trap in your environment where God's called you, right? You'll be in your environment, doing your thing, doing what God's called you to do. It's awesome. Just like when we trap animals, we go out to their habitat and try to find them, catch them off guard, right, and hide it. And what Satan does, he sets that right there. He's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to put this trap right here, and I'm going to send them somebody. I'm going to work through somebody who's not a believer, who thinks they're a believer, and I'm going to have them say something, do something that's mean and vile, and it's going to bother them. And then what I want them to do is I want to put their hand right in there and just grab onto that offense, and I'll shut the door down on them as soon as they put their hand in there. Or I can come up to that and go, yeah, they did say that. I'm just going to do this here. I'm just going to walk around that real quick. I don't have to do that. Did you know? Oh, here we go. Come on. Did you know that you don't have to defend yourself all the time? Did you know that? In my young age, my younger years, I did not know that, and I felt like I had to defend myself. Anybody said anything negative to me, you get over here, I'm going to correct you. But I learned that vengeance is the Lord's. And so I don't have to defend myself. If someone says something negative about me all the time, I don't care. And so, okay, but here's another thing. I can almost feel it in the room right now. At least some dudes in here, maybe some ladies, I don't know. When I said you don't have to defend yourself all the time, you said, well, that's weak. That's super weak, Pastor Justin. Way to go weak on us right there. No. Let me ask you a question. What's more weak? To identify a trap and walk around it, or to put your hand like a dummy in there and get stuck? Which one's more weak, right? Right? So the strong Christian will notice the trap, walk around it, step over it. And Satan's like, now I'm offended. And that's what we want, right? Number 4. To step over an offense, you often have to close the gap with love. With love. With love. Agape love. Proverbs 10:2, check this out. Hatred stirs up quarrels, but love makes up for all offenses. Hatred, no love, stirs up the quarrels, the fights. It keeps them going on and on because we're offended and we don't love each other. But love makes up for all offenses. It's love. Did you know this? If you truly love somebody, if you truly love your brothers and sisters, you assume the best instead of assuming the worst. Did you know that? Christians, we're supposed to assume the best out of each other, right? It's just like a good, strong marriage is built on the fact that these two people are going to assume the best out of each other, right? I'm not sitting there going, she's trying to steal my joy. She's trying to hold me back. Like, what's her problem? Like, I don't want to go do blah, 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 blah. And she, well, I can't believe he went, blah, 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 blah. No, I assume the best, and that's what a good, strong, godly marriage looks like, right? And the last thing is this, number 5. Patience is the key to stepping over the offense. Patience is the key to stepping over the offense. Did you know, when it said patience in that Proverbs 19:11, the Hebrew word means to have a long nose. Now, some of you are like, I have a big nose. Does that count? Like, I don't know, like a small nose. Am I at a disadvantage? Like, what's happening? It means long nose because if you think about it for a minute. When you get mad, I mean like really mad. Like really mad. Like someone kicked you in the shin mad. Like look at my nose. My nose did not get long. It got smaller. Like it got this. It went crunched up. Mad. But when I'm good, I'm like, right? Long nose, right? And that's what the Hebrew word is used there. It's not to be, patience is, it's cool. I'm good. Question to you is this. When an offense happens to you, when someone says something opposite of what you believe, and you feel like you're being attacked, do you have the short nose or long nose? And you're patient. Because if you're patient and you have an offense, because offenses are going to come, I'm able to step over the offense. But it takes patience. Patience, by the way, in Galatians 5:22 through 23 is a fruit of the Spirit. Did you know that? Love, joy, peace, patience is a fruit of the Spirit. So therefore, if you're following Christ, He is in you, you in Him. A fruit or a result of Him being in you and you doing the will of God is going to be patience. Long nose. Right? How do you react when someone offends you? Let me say a couple quick things and we're going to be done here. Choosing to not be offended is actually trusting God. Did you know that? When you choose that I am not going to be offended, because of this person said this, or they didn't do that, or this group of people. When I choose to not be offended, I'm actually trusting God. And by the way, when you choose to not be offended, to be offended, and you trust God, you're ministering to people. Did you know that? Because other people are getting offended by the same things, getting the same attacks that you are. You're not the only one, right? But when the enemy attacks you, an offense comes your way, when you trust God and you're patient with that, you minister to other people and they look at you and go, why didn't you get mad about that? I don't have to defend myself all the time. It's no big deal. My God loves me. I know some people are just going through a tough time. And it's okay if we don't see eye to eye, we don't agree on the same thing. That's fine. I'm just going to trust God. My God's got me. I'm not going to get upset about that. Because here's the thing, friend. The second that I get offended and get angry, I'm going to lose my focus. And God has called me to something bigger than just sitting there being offended in a pool of my own pity party, right? Can't believe they said this. Here's one more thought here. Trusting God will enable you to be quick to forgive. When you trust God, you're able to forgive. You're slow to speak, quick to forgive. How about this? A Christian who cannot forgive, I put that in quotes for you, okay? Because you can forgive. But if you say, I can't forgive them. So a Christian who cannot forgive is a person who's forgotten from what they've been forgiven. And I know it. I talk about offense, and there's at least one person here saying, well, you don't know what they did to me. I'm not making light of your situation. Believe me, I'm not. I know things hurt. And I know sometimes it comes from the people that are closest to you because it hurts more when it's somebody who's close to you, right? Because your expectation is higher of people that are closer to you. Do you know that? The expectation you have on the world is like down here. So if they offend you, you're kind of like, well, yeah, they're lost, whatever. But if my loved one offends me, my expectation is for them to live up here. And if they deliver down here, I am mad, right? How can I forgive them? They're supposed to love me. They're supposed to protect me. They're supposed to take care of me. And they did and said that. But don't forget what you've been forgiven from, right? And here's my main point, and I'm done. God's plans for your future are too big for you to hold on to a past offense. God's plans for you specifically. God has a plan for you right now. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. I don't care how far gone you are from Him. I don't care how many years you've ran from Him. I don't care how many bad things you can list. I don't care how many of that list of all the offenders you said, I'm all of those. God can change you. He can change your heart. And He can forgive you. And He has a plan for you. But I can already tell in here today, there's a few people in here today, at least a few of you. If you're going to be honest, you've walked in here today and you are offended by some things. If you're just being honest, just be honest for a minute. There's someone who's done something to you, has said something to you. Maybe they didn't do something you thought they were going to do. They should have done, you think, in your own words. Maybe it was something done to you when you were a kid, and you still are offended by that. Maybe it's something that happened to you a few years ago. Maybe it was somebody you thought you could trust, and they betrayed your trust. I feel like there's somebody in here today. God is trying to get your attention today. To say, if you would just stop living offended, if you would give me that offense, I'll open up your eyes to see the plan and purpose I have for your life. So I started this whole message off with a question. You guys remember that? How many people in here today have been offended? One. Okay, there we go. Here we go. How many of you have been offended in your life? You've been offended, right? Come on. All right. How many of you have an offense that's happened in your life And if you're being honest about it, like really, if you're being honest about it, I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to raise my hand with you. It still bothers you, right? There's still an offense that's happened, right? Stand up to your feet. If that's you, stand up. I'm standing up with you. Stand up. Stand up. Come on. Come on. Just be honest. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray for you. And before I start praying, I'm going to give you a couple seconds here. I want you to think of that person who did that thing to you. Whatever they did, whatever they said, whatever you thought they should have done. I want you to think of that person, okay? Think of them right now as I'm talking. Think of who that is. You probably already know you probably already thought of it. You got it in your head right now, right? Maybe it's more than one person, whatever they did. Call it to your mind right now. Now here's what I'm going to challenge you to do as I'm going to pray with you. As you've stepped up, you stood up, we're going to step over that offense. Okay? Now that you've stood up, you're going to step over. It takes faith to step over. And I know it hurts. I know it's hard. I know it is. I am standing with you, okay? So I'm going to do this with you. I have somebody in my mind right now, I'm being very transparent with you, who has offended me greatly. So with you, or you can just sit there and watch me, I don't care, but I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to trust the Lord, and I'm going to step over that offense and get my long nose out, and I'm going to give it to him and be patient and say, Lord, it's yours. I'm going to trust you and hand it over to you today. I forgive them. I'm releasing that to you. Okay?